Hello everyone. We are here to share the findings of a research project titled Academic Writing Mediated by Generative Artificial Intelligence, a Qualitative Perspective. This study was conducted at the School of Administration of the Universidad Veracruzana in Mexico and written by Carlos Arturo Torres-Gastelú and Jhoana Isabel Ruelas-Hernández. First, generative AI such as ChatGPT, Gemini, and Copilot has transitioned from a novelty to a common practice in higher education. Secondly, academic writing is a key transversal competence, yet it remains a persistent challenge within the Mexican context. Furthermore, students utilize generative AI for spell checking, brainstorming, or idea generation, information synthesis, and text structuring. However, significant risks emerge, including technological dependence, loss of originality, and factual errors. Finally, our objective is to explore university students' perceptions regarding the use of generative AI in content generation and academic writing.
Let's talk about the methodology of this study. Well, we decide to use a qualitative approach. It's an exploratory and descriptive study. The context was the Faculty of Administration in Universidad Veracruzana, Mexico. The participants were 26 students from tourism, administrations, and information technologies in organizations. Purposes sampling targeting active users of generative AI was taken in consideration for the sampling. And data collections, we used semi-structured interviews by Microsoft Teams. All the participation were recorded. For the analysis, we use inductive thematic analysis.
Regarding Category 1, forms of AI use in academic tasks, the findings show that some students use GenAI in a thoughtful and selective manner. They employ it for specific sections, such as introductions, summaries, or conclusions, while preferring to develop the main body of the work themselves. This pattern shows that they distinguish between the parts of the text they perceive as a more routine and those where they consider their contribution to be more important. In certain cases, when time pressure demands it, the pattern tends to shift toward more general use, although in several participants there was the intention to modify the output to make it their own. Significantly, in the cases analyzed, concern for academic honesty appears to arise predominantly from the students, on reflection rather than from explicit institutional guidelines. It should be noted that not all participants reported this level of reflection on their use of the tool.
Let's comment the results for Category 2, Perceived Benefits in Writing. A significant proportion of students perceive improvements in their writing as a result of using Gen AI. First, those who use the tool to generate test report being in contact with new vocabulary. Some participants report having incorporated words, concepts, and information that they later reuse independently in their assignments. Add to this is a perceived improvement in the structuring of tests, as several students expressed that artificial intelligence makes it easier for them to organize their ideas. Finally, some report learning that transcends the specific task, such as remembering spelling rules that they apply even when they are not using the tool. These benefits suggest that Gen AI can function as an indirect pedagogical reinforcement.
Moving on to category 3, limitations and errors of AI. Despite the recognized benefits, students encounter limitations. The most frequent ones are that the generated texts do not fit the specific context required by academic assignments, are repetitive, and often leave out important points when topics are complex or extensive. Added to this is the problem of source and references, as students consider the results produced by Gen AI to be unreliable. The fact some students are able to identify these flaws is an important finding, as it implies that they don't use the tool uncritically, but have instead developed their own criteria for evaluating its outputs and deciding what to incorporate into their work. However, it is precisely the tool's own limitations that lead them to think more carefully about what they produce.
Now let's talk about the results of Category 4, validation and correction strategies. Faced with the limitation identified, some of the participants, specifically 6 out of the 26 interviewed, developed their own strategies that turn the use of Gen AI into an active rather than delegated process. Cross-checking with external sources and rewriting to reflect a personal style are the most commonly reported practices among those who describe their type of use. This means that the majority of participants did not mention carrying out these kind of validations, which suggests that AI-generated tests is frequently accepted without subsequent critical review. Among those who do employ these strategies, their practices reveal that they do not conceive of the generated test as a finished product, but rather as a draft that requires their own intervention. In this sense, authorship does not disappear with the use of the tool, but it's relocated to the revision and reworking phase, which could point to a redefinition of the academic writing process rather than its replacement. So these findings apply only to a small portion of the sample.
Regarding Category 5, impact on skills and dependency, several participants report contradictory effects on their writing skills. On one hand, they mention that constant exposure to AI generated seems to help them learn indirectly aspects such as spelling, connectors, and formal structure. On the other hand, Some of them perceive that frequent use leads to a progressive loss of skills, which they acknowledge with concern. Most significantly, the majority of those interviewed are aware that they use the tool more than they consider ideal, yet maintain that they still decide for themselves what to do with it. This perceived sense of balance may be either a genuine sign of control or a way of justifying frequent use interface of the university expectation of independent writing. Finally, in category 6, originality and authenticity of text, the findings suggest a recurring concern about the loss of authenticity in academic texts. Several participants perceive that the use of Gen AI can affect creativity and displace independent thought, potentially turning the students into a mere intermediary between the tool and the final submission. This concern is heightened when use is limited to copying and pasting generated content without personal intervention, a practice that various informants identify as a significant threat to originality and genuine learning. Unlike other categories where a sense of personal control emerges, in this case the risk is described on concrete and observable, suggesting that for a portion of the participants, academic authenticity remains an important value in their identity.
Conclusions. University students do not adopt Gen AI uniformly. While some exhibit a selective profile, discriminating what to delegate and rewriting content, the majority often accepts output without critical review. For a specific group of informants, autonomous ethical reflections serves as an internal boundary to protect text authenticity, demonstrating that concerns for academic honesty arise from personal initiative rather than institutional guidelines. The same tool, perceived by some as an indirect learning aid, it's identified by others as a cause for a progressive loss of independent practice and creativity. In cases where verification strategies are applied, academic authorship does not disappear. Instead, the student's role transitions from a traditional writer to an active editor and validator. Finally, rather than enforcing outright prohibitions, institutions should progress toward pedagogical models that strengthen intellectual autonomy and guide the ethical integration of Gen AI.
This concludes our presentation for EduLearn 26 on behalf of Carlos Arturo Torres-Gastelú and myself, Jhoana Isabel Ruelas-Hernández from Universidad Veracruzana. Thank you very much for your time and attention.